What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Casual's Garage. I'm Casual, and we're back in front of our John Deere 530. This week, we're going to be tearing the sheet metal off, and I think working on the power steering. I got the power steering parts in, so I think we'll go ahead and drain the power steering out and get our valve pulled off and start working on that assembly. This is going to be a learning experience for all of us. Never had the sheet metal off of this tractor, so this could be potentially interesting. We'll start with low-hanging fruit, I suppose. Take our pre-cleaner bowl and cup off. Cup and cover, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure that won't come back to bite me. Nah. You have a nut under you. No, you're just painted on. Okay. There's our pre-cleaner off. These are a mix of 1/2 inch and 5/8 and 9/16, which is fun. So our nose cone is loose, or at least it should be ready to come off. We have to get these 2 studs on either side of the tractor lifted straight up, and then it's kind of got to go out just a little bit and get out around the radiator. So I'm just going to try and kind of go get a hammer. I can touch up the paint later. But thankfully, I think it's just going to take the paint off my pry bar for the most part. But like I said, I can touch up the paint later. Okay, there's that side moving. We'll do the same thing over here. That toward the paint. There we go. Now we'll see if it'll come off. Set that down. There we go. Hung over here. And off we come. Set sheet metal over here with the sheet metal off the 420. So this is what we're after right here, this assembly. This is the power steering. and I'll go kind of more into how it works as we take it apart. Next up, we're going to go ahead and take our exhaust loose. Those are not 9/16, and that's not the 3/8 end of that socket. So there's 4 5/16 bolts that hold this exhaust pipe down, and they're nice and simple to take out. I generally use a universal and a non-marring ratchet, or at least not a metal ratchet anyway, because a metal ratchet will obviously scratch up our chrome, and I don't want to do that. Loosen that one up, and we'll loosen up the one in the back. We can't get them out. That one's long-winded. That was like twice as long as the others. We put that pipe on there too. Why did we use such a long bolt? Who knows? Alright, and we'll take our exhaust off and walk it over here with sheet metal. Alright, I'm going to let y'all watch what's very possibly going to be a stupid idea on my part. But hey, if we fail, at least it'll be on camera and make good content, right? I've got the hood broke loose. The tank gasket was pretty stuck. I had to hit on it a little bit. So, what I'm going to attempt to do, because I have to get up over this pre-cleaner pipe, and thankfully this hood's smaller than the last one I took off, I'm going to try and pick it straight up. If I can get it around the right. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hold right there. And there we go. Okay, this is going to give me a very weird sense of deja vu because we spent about 6 months working on the power steering on the last one of these. I hope this one doesn't take anywhere near as long, but I'm pretty sure I just did this. Spoiler, because I did. So our drain plug is right here on the front. I think you guys can see that. Not really. So our drain plug's right here. It's got an aluminum crush washer behind it. You can see it's dripping fluid already. And I've just got a form a funnel in it, and I'm just going to run it into a bucket. That's a 7/8 plug, pipe plug. And I'm just going to, like I said, let the form a funnel run into a bucket. Get this adjusted here. Okay, there are no illusions. This is not going to make a mess. So don't don't expect it not to. It's going to make a mess because there's still a bunch of fluid up in the valve and the worm assembly. So I'm just going to start cracking the upper side of these lines loose. The smaller lines, there we go. Helps if you turn it the right way. The smaller lines are 7/8. And the big line, the suction line, is 1 1/4 inches. Yeah, big boy. Oh, God. All right, Hercules. Apparently Hercules put these lines on. They do not need to be that tight. Tight is not what seals these. The crush washers seal these. They do not need to be that tight at all. Okay, and it just pulls out. And like I said, it's going to make a mess. There's no two ways about it. But these crush washers right here are what actually seal these. I think the crush washer came out. Yeah, it did. Yeah, the crush washers are what actually seal these. Tightness does not seal these. They don't need to be that tight. Can I balance you? Maybe. It's probably going to fall in the bucket. Because why would it fall anywhere else? All right. We'll crack our upper line loose. That's about how tight they need to be. They need to be just a little over snug. Not tight. Tight ain't always right. Or something like that. Okay. This big one, like I said, is 1.25 inches. Hercules, once again, put these on. There's not that many threads to this. There's just a bad spot in these threads that's making it hard to back them out. I don't know what size they are, and I know I don't have tape that fits it though. So it's just going to be a bad spot. I actually didn't have to take the suction line loose, but it's loose. The last line is back here in a really aggravating spot behind the suction line. What are the odds? Yeah, you're not loose enough for that. There is kind of an order of operations to these lines, especially if you're taking the entire system apart. But I'm not taking the entire thing apart right now, so we'll just have to fight this one to get it out. There we go. There we go. There's our second line. Hopefully you can see a little better there. Remember if these are inch or if they're 7/8 or if it's one of each. Okay, that's definitely not 7/8. That's definitely not 7/8. Cool. Let me find another inch. Okay, got another inch. Yeah, there we go. This is if I remember right, a JIC fitting, so it also doesn't need to be super, super tight. Snug will do. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Bonus points if anybody can tell me what movie that's referencing. Okay. So there's all our lines loose. Okay. There's 4 bolts that hold this on. The only important thing to know here is the gasket between the worm and the sector is what sets our free play in the steering wheel. It sets the backlash here, which sets the free play in the steering wheel. So we need to keep up with the number of shims that are here. It's okay if we destroy the shims. New ones are available from Deere, but we do need to make sure we know the thickness of this shim so we can go back with the same one. So I'm just gonna see. Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, that's not a 9/16. That is. Let's see, can I take the rest of this bolt the rest of the way out? Because that U-joint doesn't feel like it's moving. Okay, that bolt's loose now. There we go. Going straight to the bench. There we go. So this is the shim I said we were almost definitely going to destroy. Somebody's been in here with blue silicone trying to stop it from leaking. Great. More stuff to clean. Cool. So I need to measure this shim so we know what thickness to put back in. And then this is just a gasket that is actually in good shape. I'm going to try and reuse that. We're on the bench. This is our valve and worm assembly. So this is our worm housing here. Our worm gear is inside it. This is the actuating sleeve. This is what actually turns the power steering, well, and manual steering when it's in manual, before the power steering takes over. This had NACs on it. Cool. And then this is our valve. If you have a tractor that wants to steer by itself one way or the other and it has power steering, this is your culprit. And what you need to do is take its 4 mounting bolts loose and tap it forward or backwards. I believe backwards goes to the right, forwards goes to the left, if I remember correctly. So what we're going to do before we do anything is take a paint marker and mark right across the joint. Yes, I know it's red. It stands out between the valve assembly and the worm assembly. And that's so we can get it back to where it's at right now at the very least. And I'm going to mark one on the bottom side as well. And it's dirty down here and it's probably not going to want to write. Yeah, I won't be able to see that one, but that's okay. Clean off my marker. So we're not really going to do anything with the valve. Let's see. Your relief valve on the new design is right here in this passage. Usually you don't want to touch this. We have made that mistake in the past. And if you do that, you put an extra washer behind it to raise the pressure. You can very quickly raise the pressure too high, blow the seals out of the pedestal, and then you're into the pedestal, and that's a whole lot of work. That's what caused us to have to rebuild the entire power steering on the 630. So generally don't mess with your relief valve. If you have low pressure, you need to rebuild the pump. This on the front right here, this is called the flow control valve, and what that does is meter the flow of oil so that the effort to steer is the same at low RPMs and high RPMs. I believe the book says to set this at like 2.5 turns from seated or something like that. When I've spoken to Richard Wayne about this, I had him rebore the valve on the 630 to correct poor steering. When I spoke to Richard Wayne about this, he said he sets these at 2, I believe. Yeah, 2 turns, and tells everybody do not touch them. You shouldn't need to touch them if your valve is in good shape. And then in this main bore behind this plug here is the actual spool valve for the hydraulic actuation. And that's what really gets worn out. The flow control valve can get worn as well, as can the relief valve, but the spool valve is what really gets worn out. And what you can do is you can send them to Richard, or I believe George Persinger does them as well at Green Parts of VA. And they'll take this valve apart, and what they'll do is they'll actually bore this spool bore bigger by a few thousandths, and they put in an oversized spool that they machine so that the original tolerances are corrected, and that brings this valve back to factory operation. If you have poor steering but decent pressure, so you're sure it's not your pump, most of the time your problem's going to be in here. If you have poor steering, most of the time your problem's in here. That's more often than not, probably your problem will be in this valve. Now, if your pump is actively leaking, so it's got oil slobber around it, or you are seeing oil getting pushed up out the vent of the dipstick, that means your pump is leaking and sucking air. Those you should fix probably before you say, yes, we're absolutely going to do the valve. But if you suspect the valve at all, spend the $500, send it to Richard or George, have it bored, and never have to worry about it again. So we've got it marked. We're just going to take a 9/16 and break these bolts loose. right now, this piece is what we're after. The first thing we're going to do is pop this cover off, which is a 3/4. Come on, give me my adapter back. And these are usually pretty tight. There's that. And then this big front nut on here is, I don't even know what the standard size is. The only socket I have that fits it, I think, is a 41 millimeter. But there's a set of shims between this cover and the housing. And what that does is set the in-play or preload on the bearings for this worm. And that's a very important measurement for getting this thing to steer correctly. In the book, in the power steering book, they tell you it's like 4 thousandths or something in play. It's 1 to 4 thousandths in play measured with an indicator through this front cover. I've been told by Richard and George both that the better way to set these is to actually sit here, and once you get the shims worked in, get the bearings seated, sit here and spin it, and you actually want it probably to be just a little bit tighter than that. These perform probably the best when they have actually a slight preload on them once they're worn in. When they were new, the 1 to 4 thousandths was probably good. When I talked to Richard about the 630, and I told him I had mine set at like 2 thousandths or 3 thousandths, something like that, he goes, that's in my mind very excessive for a 60-year-old tractor. He told me basically ignore the measurements in the book and go by feel, and you want it to just drag a little bit. So there's our shim pack. And like I said, that sets the in-play or preload on our worm gear. So I'm just going to set that cap back out of the way for right now. Okay, so next step to taking this apart is a very critical step. Critical enough that I'm going to get rid of standard and actually use metric. So I'm going to take my calipers. I'm going to use the depth function, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the front edge of this bushing here, which I think you guys can see, yeah. I'm going to measure from the front edge of this bushing to the edge of the worm, and I'm going to record that measurement. The reason that's important is that's what sets what's called our helix width, which is one of the 3 main adjustments for this power steering system. And we'll want to put that adjustment back exactly like it was when we took it apart. Hello, geese. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but geese everywhere. Okay, so it's set at 16.13 millimeters. So I'm going to write that down so I don't forget it. Take a 5/16 Allen. Okay. There we go. So there's a lock screw in here that holds that bushing tight. Well, it ended up breaking the entire bushing loose. That's okay. So we'll take the bushing out. And I'll worry about getting that lock screw out when I can put that in the vise here in a little bit. Now, This is what I couldn't remember in the last clip. Our worm slides straight out the front. Oh, and thank God this worm is in good shape. It is in very good shape. So what you'll see a lot of times on these worms is this keyway is ever so slightly off center. And what that does is it puts a disproportionate amount of pressure on this land right here. And so almost every one of these you'll see has this cracked off. Most of them are worse than this. This is actually in really good shape. So we'll set it right there. And then our actuating sleeve comes out the back of the housing. So we're done with the housing for the moment. There is a seal or an O-ring in here somewhere that I can't remember exactly where. It might be on the support. I can't remember. There's an O-ring somewhere that I know we'll probably need to change while we got this apart. But this is the actuating sleeve. Don't lose the key. Don't lose the woodruff key. That's important. This is the actuating sleeve, and its purpose is basically to translate the steering wheel. So our steering shaft splines in right here. Translate our steering wheel through the worm gear to the sector, or actuate the hydraulic valve. And it does that by a spring-loaded set of cams in here. And so when you turn, when you go, I'm not sure I can hold on to it well enough to with it oily like this to be able to demonstrate. But when you turn and you go over a certain amount of force with the steering wheel, you jump the cams basically, and that sends the actuating sleeve forward and starts actuating this this valve. To take this apart, it looks rather barbaric. This shaft is very hard steel. So do not freak out about what I'm going to do, because I'm going to read it to you out of the book. Separate worm shaft from actuating sleeve by using a pair of vice grip pliers to turn the shaft in a counterclockwise direction about 90 degrees so the cam and shaft keyways align. The shaft then pulls free from the sleeve. So that's what I'm going to do. This shaft is very hard steel. The vice grips are not going to hurt it. I'll be right back when we get the set of vice grips. Okay, I'm back with the vice grips. Like I said, they're not going to hurt this shaft. This shaft is very hard steel. I do need to get them adjusted though. That's too loose. Okay, so we're going to turn it roughly 90 degrees, and you'll feel the cam slots align. Yeah, they're lined up. It's just tight. There we go. And there we go, our shaft's okay. Okay, we're back. It's a different day. I ran out of time the other day. I've got the shaft back in the vice grip so I can hold on to it. The more I've sat here and looked at these cams, the more I think I want to pull them off the shaft. Proper operation, this length of this spring is critical, quote unquote. So what I'm going to do is take and measure, just because there's not a good way to get on the back of the spring, from the front flat face of the spring, right here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but right here, I'm gonna measure from there to these flat washers. Since we know there's 2 flat washers there, and we're gonna put the same 2 flat washers back on, I'm gonna measure that distance, and we're right about 50.42, which I've already thought through this. I already measured it and wrote it down. So I'm just going to hold on to that measurement for later. So we're going to see if we can't get this cotter pin out, and I'll replace it with a new one later. All right, so the the manual doesn't give you any indications on a good way to do this. But the spring is shorter than the stud, so you can just back it off. And our cams just slide right off. At least the free floating cam does anyway. All right, so we'll get a relief valve out. I was in there just tight enough I didn't want to try and twist on it too much. So there's our relief valve cap, and then our relief valve is down here. Probably grab a pair of needle nose and pull it out. So we got our cap off. You, sir, why do you not want to move? You, sir, should be coming out of there. Ouch! There it comes. Pinched it myself. Yeah, there's our washers. So don't lose those. That's the pressure adjustment for the relief valve. So I'm going to take this whole relief assembly, just like this, and there's a spring and a bottom part to the valve down in here. So we're going to move around to the other side. And go back to our flow control valve. Okay. So is how that works. Okay, So there's our adjustment screw. I'm going to stick our lock screw back on it and take that over to the bench. I don't think this is going to move easily. Oh, I was wrong. I love it when I'm wrong, because I really did not think that was going to move. Okay, there's a rubber seal behind that plug. And see if we can get the spool retainer loose, which is going to require holding the whole valve body. Okay, that could have gone much worse. I was expecting that to be a lot tighter. Okay, it's the actuating arm. Okay, and our spool should as much as it doesn't want to come out the front. There it comes. So there's our spool valve. Which is kind of the whole brain of the power steering system. There's been a lot go on over the last couple of days while I've been filming this footage. I've changed my mind several times. We found a couple of things we weren't expecting. We're kind of hoping not to have to deal with. So we're actually going to go ahead and end this video here. So we've got the sheet metal off the tractor. We've got our steering worm and actuating assembly and the valve off. It's on the bench behind me. You guys saw me clean it up. WD-40 all the parts I was afraid we were going to rust. We're actually, like I said, going to call it there. When I got into cleaning this stuff up, I ended up finding some grease that had been packed in the worm housing, and it was actually holding a bunch of grit. And so that prompted me to have to take the valve apart and clean it out. I'm afraid there's grease in the pedestal, but I'm not pulling the entire pedestal apart right now. That is way more involved than I intend to get with this tractor right at the moment. So that's where we're at. And since I've pulled the valve apart and everything, the crush washers are all kind of So I've got parts on order now, so that's going to make this a good point to end this video, and then we'll come back and pick up with reassembly when I get parts here, and I'll actually talk about what the problem is. I've cut out most of that from this video, so I apologize if the timeline's kind of hard to follow in this video. There's not really going to be a lot of information in this video. It's really just going to be watching me work. I'll talk about in next week's video what the actual problem is, what we need to do, and what we're going to do to get everything back to working order and get it back on the tractor. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next week.